We are live. Hare Krishna, dear Vaishnavis. Welcome to Sadhvi Sangha's Krishna Katha Festival, day 7. And we're so very, very grateful and honored this evening. It's evening for me here in Europe to welcome Radha Dd. And she's going to be speaking this evening on the topic of depending on Krishna. We're so grateful to have Radha Prabhu here. She's a disciple of His Holiness Mukunda Goswami and has a lifelong interest in issues concerning women and children. She currently serves as ISKCON's International Vaishnavi Minister, which gives her the opportunity to work with ISKCON's Governing Body Commission on issues affecting Vaishnavis. Her past service includes work with ISKCON Communications and the Child Protection Office, as well as congregational preaching. Radha Prabhu is a graduate of Harvard Law School and practices law in the US with an emphasis on helping victims of domestic abuse. She's a trained peer counselor for domestic abuse issues and previously taught at Chapman University School of Law and the University of San Diego School of Law. So it's amazing, Radha Prabhu, how you're helping ladies from every angle. Something very unique about you. Thank you for being so generous with your time this evening. We are very eager to hear from you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Please accept my obeisances. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you for this wonderful service you all are doing for Vaishnavis around the world. So many times we feel like we need some permission or approval before we can take up a service and fill a need. And you all are such a great example of why that's not necessarily true, you know. And I so much appreciate not only, you know, the facility that you're giving for the women to speak, but the facility that you're giving for the women to hear. You know, it's such a nice reciprocation. And unfortunately, for many different reasons, Vaishnavis don't always get as much Vaishnavi Sangha as we would like. So thank you so much for this service and for allowing me to be here. So I was asked to speak, and it's very close to Krishna Janmashtami. So naturally, we're all meditating on the pastimes of Krishna's appearance. And whenever I meditate on those pastimes, something that always strikes me is how the pastime exemplifies the problematic nature of taking shelter of material things, right? So this is a time when I typically reflect on my own, you know, state of surrender, which is nominal, you know, and try to identify what are the material things I'm taking shelter of that I need to let go of. Today, I'd like to break this discussion down into 3 basic questions. The first one is, you know, what am I taking shelter of? And the second one is related. How am I fooling myself? Because I don't overtly decide to take shelter of something material, right? It sneaks in because my intelligence is expert at making material things look spiritual and bad qualities look like good qualities. So I have to ask myself, you know, how am I tricking myself? And then it always comes back to this third question, which is, do I trust Krishna, right? And my answer is always kind of, sort of, yeah, you know, there's some trust there, but clearly not complete trust because I am still holding on to these material things. I had an experience recently that really made me understand how deep my dependence on material shelter goes. My uncle died a few months ago, and I'm 58, and I have not spent any appreciable amount of time with this man although he's a very nice man. But I haven't spent much time with him in the last 30 years, right? And I was really struck at how upsetting his death was to me. You know, I was asking myself, why does this make such a difference? And I realized it's because he was the uncle, the only, family member, except for my mother, who was at all interested in Krishna consciousness and what I'm doing with this part of my life, right? And I realized that, I feel a sense of shame, because I did let my family down on a material level. I went to a Ivy League school, I got a great job out of law school, and I made a hard right, and went in a different direction because of association with the devotees. So my paternal family sees me as a failure, and I thought I'd gotten past that. I've worked on getting past that. But what I realized when my uncle died was that there was a little voice in the back of my head that was saying, someday they're going to understand. Someday they're going to realize that you're not a failure, right? So when this particular uncle left, it was clear to me, it's like Krishna was saying, no, they're not. They're not ever going to understand what you did. They're not ever going to value it. And, their opinion of you isn't going to change. But here I was, holding on to this shelter of family, thinking that someday I'm going to get their approval and it's going to make a difference. Why on earth I think it should make a difference, I don't know. But it's that material attachment, that idea that some material circumstance is going to save me, right? So it made me think, okay, well, what else am I holding on to instead of fully trusting Krishna, right? And surrender is a process. The ultimate act of surrender can be, in a moment, but there's a process to get to that moment. And Krishna even says, as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly, right? So most of us don't start out joining ISKCON or, finding a spiritual master and becoming immediately enlightened, right? It's something that takes time. And also it's a process that we need to be actively involved in. Okay. A lot of times we get a little spiritually lazy because we're told that if we practice Krishna consciousness, good qualities will manifest automatically, right? And they will, okay? But we can certainly speed up that process, right? And that's part of our duty as devotees, right? Not to be lazy, to think it's okay to be mean to people or, whatever our particular bad quality happens to be, just because at some point, that's spontaneously going to go away. Even when we actively try to cultivate good qualities, as we should, we still need help. We can't get rid of our bad qualities, our anarthas, all by ourselves. We need Krishna's help for that. As Krishna says, his divine energy is difficult to overcome. We can't overcome it without his help. So we're going to be conditioned by the material modes. So these two facts together, we need to actively be involved and we need Krishna's mercy. Ultimately, what does that mean? Well, it means that we need to be in a dynamic relationship with the Lord, right? We need to be praying, help me see what's in my heart and help me get rid of it. Dear Lord, this is where I think I'm at. Please let me know what else I need to work on. Please let me know if I'm not seeing myself correctly. If we do the work, Krishna will take away that bad habit. That's how we send him the message that we're ready to have that anartha removed. But if we never, make the endeavor, then we're basically telling Krishna, I'm okay with this. I'd like to keep it. And he's merciful, so he'll let us, right? So I said that this Advent pastime usually makes me think of this. And I just like to talk about, different material shelters and what this pastime says about them. Right? So the first person I think of is Devaki, right? Because Devaki was in a situation where I would expect her to be fully protected. You know, we're told that a woman, a Vaishnavi, always needs a husband, a father, and a son to protect her. And that if she has one of those, you know, she's protected, right? Well, Devaki, you know, has a loving father, a loving husband, and a loving brother who wants to serve her, right? And somehow she still ends up in this situation where she's clearly not protected. She comes from a wealthy family, right? I personally have an issue of thinking of financial security as something I can take shelter of, right? You know, many of us do, right? And this pastime is in part designed to show us the limitations of these shelters, because despite this opulence, despite the loving father who gives, you know, such a great dowry, even sending 200 friends to go with Devaki to her new home, despite a husband who endeavors greatly to protect her, and, you know, despite this powerful, well-connected brother, you know, her life is threatened, right? So these things aren't real shelter, right? And even Vasudeva, you know, he shows us some limitations of material qualities. He is of utmost integrity. You know, he has vast spiritual knowledge. He's extremely surrendered and renounced, you know, but when he debates with Kamsa, right, that intellect, that knowledge, they're not fully successful at protecting Devaki. Okay, he does get a certain, you know, a certain concession that Devaki herself will be protected, but, you know, as a Vaishnavi, as a mother, if my husband offered me a form of protection that didn't include my children, you know, I can tell you that would not be good enough, you know. So Vasudeva also is struggling with, you know, how do I protect my wife against this terrible circumstance? And then, of course, you know, the quintessential example of someone who takes shelter of the wrong things is Kamsa himself, right? And Kamsa is, you know, he is a Kshatriya. He comes from a good family. He understands Vedic morality. And yet, just like that, he changes, you know, from a good Kshatriya to a bad Kshatriya. Why? Because he's afraid to die. He's afraid he's going to be killed, right? And how many of us, I know there have been times in my life when this has been true, how many of us may let go of a value or a practice or an association or a sentiment that we know to be spiritually or morally superior, but we let it go in a moment of crisis because of fear, right? So Kamsa is reminding us, you have to be the same person in every circumstance, whether your life is threatened or not, whether, you know, your reputation is threatened or not, whether your financial security is threatened or not. And instead of taking shelter of the Lord, Kamsa takes shelter of material arrangements. He goes into league, he starts a criminal conspiracy with the most low and degraded of demons, you know, who are baby killers and, you know, commit horrible acts. Presumably, these are not, you know, people he would normally associate with, but in order to protect his life, he'll go to any lengths, right? Killing children, you know, he orders the killing of children in order to protect himself. He makes political alliances and does it very well. His kingdom, strategically, materially, politically, is very well situated. And none of that protects him from death, right? And the irony is, even if he had been successful in identifying Devaki's child and preventing that child from killing him, he still would have been unprotected from death, right? He's trying to avoid something that ultimately is going to happen anyway. And he completely violates the moral code that he was raised with in order to do this. So we can see, you know, he is taking shelter of the material energy and he gets smashed. Devaki and Vasudeva ultimately are taking shelter of the Lord and they are ultimately freed. So, you know, simple lesson, right? Not rocket science here, but this is something nice to meditate on, a good reminder. Yeah. So my second question was, how am I fooling myself? And this Advent pastime also talks about revelation, right? So part of the revelation I need from the Lord is, what do I need to get rid of and what do I need to cultivate? We require Krishna's help because we can't see these things for ourselves, right? But Krishna often sends that help in the form of other devotees. So as I get older, I become more and more inclined to do what I call a reality check with other devotees when I am making an important decision, or when I am making a decision and I'm in a state of emotional distress. And usually the way that comes up is someone hurts my feelings, right? And I'm not entirely sure why people don't recognize how superior I am and just agree with everything I say. But somehow, people disagree with me. They'll tell me I'm wrong. They'll criticize me, and my feelings get hurt. And when my feelings get hurt, my instinctive reaction is, let's go to war. I will burn down your house, and I will make sure that, nothing ever goes well for you again in this life because you have dared to criticize me, right? So I've been around devotees enough to know that's probably not the right reaction, right? So, when I first started trying to get devotees to help me with my reactions, it was very much on that platform of like, okay, you just can't react like that. That's over the top. But interestingly, as I continue to do this, I started realizing that many times when my feelings were hurt, the other person hadn't done anything wrong. I was misunderstanding the situation, misinterpreting it, being hypersensitive to criticism, right? So these mirrors that devotees can be for us are so important. You can't see the back of your own head, right? And so devotees who love us can show us things that we maybe can't see or don't want to see, right? And that's an act of love. That was something else I had to learn, was that, when devotees correct me, it's an act of love, right? So that I can identify the false shelter and let go of it. And who exemplifies this point is Putana, right? Putana looks like one thing, but actually is something else. So the demon is Putana. She comes in a form where she is beautiful, cultured. She's wearing opulent garments, so she appears to be wealthy. And she presents herself in a very maternal role, okay? And the Brajvasis, including Mother Yashoda, they are open-hearted, trusting people, right? So when they see her come, they're welcoming her. They're happy that she wants to give Krishna some attention, right? In our societies today, if a strange woman walked in and went to pick up your baby, you probably have at least some hesitation, if not an outright defensive reaction. Don't touch my child, right? But the Brajvasis are open-hearted and they see the externality, right? And they don't put up any resistance. So she picks up Krishna and she begins to feed him, right? Again, such a maternal thing. But what is her internal state? She's trying to poison him. She's trying to kill him. So on the one hand, she looks like a mother. On the other hand, she's actually a serial killer, okay? The Brajvasis can't see this. How does it become revealed? Krishna. Krishna takes her offering of breast milk, poisoned breast milk, but takes her life there along with it. And when she leaves that body, her true nature is revealed. And this is Krishna. This is the thing that Krishna can do for us as well, right? How many Putanas do I have running around in my heart, and when will I be willing to let them go? A couple of things that I sometimes, traps that I fall into, traps that I set for myself and I fall into, making good qualities bad qualities look like good qualities. One is righteous indignation. Okay. As devotees, we know we're supposed to be humble, right? So even when I'm not humble, which is all the time, even though I am not humble, I will at least pay lip service to the idea that I should be humble, right? So if someone offends me, I'm learning that, I can take the humble position and just let it go, right? But what if someone is hurting someone else? What if a devotee is hurting another devotee, right? My thinking years ago was, okay, then it's my duty to defend the devotee who's being hurt, right? And again, I'm bringing that mindset of, I will burn your house down into the conflict, right? And I felt like that was justified. Okay, I understand I can't react like that when someone hurts me, but if someone's hurting a devotee, certainly, anything I say or do is justified, right? Righteous indignation. I'm not fault finding, right? I'm defending a devotee, okay? And it turns out that Vaishnava aparad is not a problem only when you are dealing with a devotee who's behaving well. Vaishnava aparad can be a problem when we are dealing with a devotee who is behaving badly, and it took me a long time to understand that. And I did some serious damage to my own spiritual development in the process, okay? So our duty as Vaishnavas is to meet that standard of behavior in all our dealings. It doesn't mean that an abuser doesn't get corrected, doesn't have to face consequences for his or her action. But whenever we approach these situations, our standard of behavior should be the same, dealing with someone who is, reciprocating nicely and someone who is reciprocating badly. So that idea that, I could be righteously indignant and that would justify anything, that's something that I was taking shelter of that was, a complete misconception. Another one is spiritual pride, right? And, we, as devotees, we're competitive, right? We talk about book scores, we talk about, Lakshmi points, we talk about, how many verses have I memorized? How early do I get up? How many rounds do I chant? And there's nothing wrong with a little, motivation in terms of competition. But I think we often take it too far, right? And something that has come to my attention recently is that when I do devotional service, my motives are not pure. That's not rocket science, okay? The part that is new for me is the extent to which spiritual pride is driving my behavior. It's very difficult for me to really absorb myself in services where no one sees me doing it. It is much easier for me to put my heart into a service that I know I'm going to get praised for, right? That's spiritual pride. So much of what I'm doing as devotional service probably isn't devotional service at all, But Krishna's merciful. He allows me to dovetail my need for, prophet adoration and distinction into something that brings me into association with devotees and encourages me to make spiritual progress. Radha Dd Swami said something that really caught my attention and focused me on this issue. He said, when we take pride in our service, it's as if we made a beautiful offering of bhoga for the Lord and then put sand into every dish, right? Yeah, and so I thought, wow, if I look at my service, how much of the offering is sand? And I'll tell you, it's way more than half. I'm not going to get any more specific, but it's way more than half. So clearly, this is something that I need to work on. All right. Sometimes, as devotees, we judge, based on externalities, right? And this pastime also helps us, take a look at that behavior, right? Many years ago, when I joined ISKCON, the women at the community I joined, we always stood in the back. We always covered our heads. We were we didn't lead kirtan, we didn't give class, we felt like valued members of the community, but there was a certain space that was for us and a certain code of behavior that was for us. And we, that's just how we did things. And as a result, when we danced in kirtan, it was done in a very toned down way. The idea was that you didn't want to attract any attention to yourself. And so we would behave in a very restrained manner. And Bhaktitirtha Swami came through one year with a group of his disciples. They're all black-bodied devotees. And they danced, those women, boy, they danced with such exuberance and such joy and so much motion, and my first nasty, conditioned material thought was, well, they're not very good devotees. Look at the way they're dancing, right? And later I realized, okay, these devotees were dancing in kirtan to please the Lord, right? They were absorbed in the holy name, and that ecstasy was coming out in their dancing. I was dancing for the Lord with the goal of pleasing the temple authorities. My concentration was not on Krishna. It was not on, the holy name. It was on, look at how modest and chaste and shy I am, right? Look at what a great job I'm doing of being a good devotee, a good Vaishnavi, right? So externally, there's, at least in my mind, a code of how one should behave, right? But internally, I'm the one in Maya, I'm the one who's not getting the point, and these devotees who are violating what I think is a code, right? They're actually properly situated, okay? And similarly, a few years ago, a group of young men came to our temple during the morning program, and they were all wearing, business casual type clothing, right? They looked like, salesmen or something. And no one greeted them, right? They were white body, by the way. And no one greeted them. They came in, they offered dandavats in front of Srila Prabhupada, right? And they went and saw the deities, and no one offered them any prasadam or anything, because they didn't look like what we thought of as devotees, right? If they'd been Indian body, we might have thought, oh yes, even though they're businessmen, they're still devotees, right? But because they were white body, we didn't think like that. And then, as they were leaving, my curiosity got the best of me, and I went and asked them, how did you hear about our temple, right? And they're like, they were Gurukulis, they'd grown up in ISKCON, right? But to me, they didn't look like devotees, right? So this idea of judging by the externalities, that's the Putana mind, right? We have to see the internal state. We have to depend on Krishna to give us the information. One of the things that Bhaktivinoda Thakur says about Putana is that she represents false teachings, right? And so Krishna will reveal the false teaching so that we won't be misled. And many times we aren't going to know the answer. I mean, how can I know someone's internal state? I can't, right? But Krishna will reveal to us. If I don't judge by externalities and I treat everyone with respect, right? Krishna's going to let me know, who I can trust, who I can't, who's, a proper person to associate with and who's not. And that's part of surrender, is leaving some of these things for Krishna to handle. So why am I not willing to do that? It comes back to trust, right? I trust Krishna so far. I trust Krishna much farther than I used to, but I still don't trust him all the way. I'm still attached to things that I think are going to make my life happier, going to protect me, going to benefit me in some way. So one of the things I meditate on is that Krishna promises us things. And one of the things he promises is that if we surrender to him, he will protect us. Right? So that doesn't necessarily get me all the way to surrender. Very few people read, the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and say, okay, I'm going to surrender to Krishna, and are immediately pure devotees. It doesn't work like that. It's a process we have to work at. But keeping that promise in the forefront of my mind helps me see what happens to me, my life events, in a particular context, right? Transcendental knowledge is designed to do that. It doesn't necessarily change our hearts instantaneously, but it gives us a filter through which we can understand what we're experiencing. So always thinking that Krishna has promised to protect me. How can I see Krishna's protection in this circumstance? Helps me to view my life from a different point of view, helps me to make progress. Sometimes we have a fear that we think is too big to give to Krishna, right? Like Kamsa, Kamsa didn't believe there was anyone that could protect him better than he could protect himself. And so that fear of death drove him, right? For many years, my fear of financial insecurity was something that I couldn't give to Krishna, right? It took the mercy of devotees, to help me understand that there's nothing you can't take to Krishna, right? Sometimes it's our children or our relationship with our family. There's so many different things that we feel like, oh, I can't let go on this issue. It's just too important. And basically what I'm saying, saying to Krishna is, I believe you can do some very minor things, but I don't think you can handle the big problems. Now, when I say it out loud, I realize how ridiculous that mindset is, but it's still driving me a little bit inside. My personal fear is that I'm not worthy, that I'm not good enough. And that's why I have this need for praise. That's why there's so much spiritual, pride, not really spiritual, but my pride masquerades as something spiritual when I do my service, because I'm afraid I'm not good enough. So I am constantly looking for feedback on my service to prove that I am good enough. I had an interesting experience a couple of months ago where I was asked to do a particular service. And, there's some things in ISKCON you do and you're going to get criticized, that there are hot topic issues or whatever. You just know you're going to get criticized. And, I said, no, I'm not doing that because I knew I would get criticized, right? And later I realized, okay, what is the point of devotional service? I was actually reading about devotional service, So what is the point of devotional service? It is to please Krishna, right? When I looked at that particular service from the lens of like, okay, pleasing Krishna, helping devotees, protecting Srila Prabhupada's movement, it was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be doing that. It makes sense for me to do that. That would be the thing that would be most pleasing to Krishna. And making a decision based on, I don't want to get criticized, right? There's that fear that drives me. And that was something that I could then say to Krishna, okay, I think this is what you want me to do. It seems like this would be more pleasing to you. So please, help me do it. Help me remember that it doesn't matter if people criticize, right? People criticize, my husband points out, people criticized Srila Prabhupada, right? People criticized Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The residents of Dwarka criticized Krishna when they thought he had stolen the Shamataka jewel, right? Criticism is not the end of the world, right? It matters who's doing the criticizing, what they're criticizing, what I've done. It's all circumstantial, right? Criticism is information that allows me to evaluate my behavior, right? It's not the end of the world. So that was a nice experience to go through, to feel like, okay, I'm kind of starting to understand a little bit what trusting Krishna means. Many times we fear surrender because we feel like we're going to lose something, right? For me, one of the big things is I'm going to lose the respect of my family. Okay, so so we have to unpack that a little bit. You know, if I'm afraid of losing something, does that make sense? Am I genuinely going to lose something? And Prabhupada and Krishna both tell us nothing is yours, right? Nothing is yours. When Krishna takes something away from me, it's because I don't need it, right? He's giving me what I need. And if he takes it away, by definition, I don't need it, right? And sometimes, you know, we go through a period of grieving, you know, if someone dies or, you know, we have some reversal that causes a loss. We may naturally feel sad about that, you know, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. What I'm saying is, even while I'm going through the sadness or whatever emotional reaction I have, I can understand that Krishna is taking from me something that was never mine in the first place and something that I don't need, right? And sometimes when Krishna takes things away from the outside, it looks painful, you know, and depending on the level of realization of the person who's having that experience, it may be painful internally. I don't know. You know, I can't judge that, but it at least to me, you know, it looks painful from the outside, right? One of the things that I really have a hard time understanding is when young children die, right? And I've met mothers in ISKCON who have had their children die very young, and they see it as Krishna's, no resentment toward the Lord, you know, Krishna's mercy. It's what needed to happen. They're perfectly fine with that. And I honestly have a hard time understanding that, because I would not be so trusting. At least I don't think I would in that same situation. Okay. But when Krishna takes from us, he's not taking anything that we really own, right? So this fear of loss, it's really illusory, right? Krishna's not going to take anything from me but my illusions. That's what he's taking from us. Okay. And someone who goes through this experience in a way that I can really relate to is Kaliya, right? I've always had this sense that Kaliya is just misunderstood, right? You know, I can totally identify with the idea that he felt like he was on his turf and people were disrespecting him. You know, he'd been put in this very difficult situation. He had to take his family and leave his home, right? And he finds this place that, you know, no one else is living, and he moves in there. And yeah, you know, there's some problems with polluting the atmosphere and everything. But, you know, what was he supposed to do, right? You know, he had to be somewhere, right? He had a family depending on him. And I've definitely had that experience where someone gets into what I think of as my space, you know, and does something in a way that I don't like. And I feel disrespected and I feel angry, right? So, you know, so I'm Kaliya, right? I'm Kaliya. I have exactly his perspective on this. And so how does Krishna deal with Kaliya, right? You know, Kaliya tries to overcome Krishna and Krishna overcomes Kaliya. And what does he do? You know, he kicks him in the head, right? Boot to the head. That's what my grandson always says, boot to the head, right? And for Kaliya, each kick is like a thunderbolt, right? The gopis experience Krishna's feet as being so soft, they're concerned he may hurt his feet walking in the Vraj forest, right? They're like rose petals, lotus petals. Kaliya experiences Krishna's feet with each kick is a thunderbolt, right? And what is the point of that kicking, right? Kaliya is bad, we're going to put him in his place, right? He's encroached on Vraj and we're going to make sure he suffers for it. No, you know, that's not what Krishna does. Krishna is causing him to vomit up his poison, right? The more Krishna kicks, the more hoods he defeats, all of that nasty, negative stuff is going out, right? And Kaliya is being put in a place where he can change. Because with all of that poison in him, he couldn't be anything but envious, right? How could he change with all of that poison in him? So Krishna purifies him, and that allows Kaliya to surrender, to say, you know, I understand now. You weren't killing me, you were saving me, right? I understand now that the way I was looking at the world was not only wrong, but it was destructive to me. Okay. So we don't want to be like Kalia, right? We don't want to hold on to our anartas, to hold on to that poison. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful about how we look at things. And one of the tendencies I have, and I see other devotees have, is that we try to spiritualize material things. Okay. And what I mean is we take something that's really a matter of social convention or culture or habit, and then we call it spiritual. Right? Very simple example. When I joined ISKCON, everyone's favorite soda was 7-Up. 7-Up was bona fide. All the other soda flavors were not. Why is this? Because Srila Prabhupada liked 7-Up. Therefore, if you had a party and you were going to serve soda, you were going to serve 7-Up. I'm sorry if people prefer ginger ale or root beer. You know, that's not bona fide, right? There's nothing inherently spiritual about 7-Up, right? When we're making an offering to the Lord, it doesn't matter whether it's 7-Up or ginger ale in the cup. It matters whether there's bhakti in the heart, right? But we were young, you know, we were definitely focused more on externals than internals because we hadn't had time to develop a whole lot of internals, right? But we do that with other things, right? I'm not going to get political, I promise, but I'm just going to use the example of the Vaishnavi Diksha Guru issue. Okay. When I first started thinking about this issue, it was completely clear to me that no one could possibly ever legitimately disagree with the proposition that Vaishnavis should be allowed to be Diksha Gurus. And anyone who disagreed with me, you know, was obviously not a sincere devotee, right? And there are people who have had the exact opposite reaction, that it's completely clear that there's no justification for having Vaishnavi Diksha Gurus in our movement. And anyone who thinks differently is wrong and they're not sincere. And both sides tell each other, well, that's just your cultural conditioning. You're from the West, so you think, you know, it's got to be like that. And the other side says, you know, no, that's because you're from India or, you know, wherever, traditional culture. That's just your culture. It's not spiritual. And both of us are right. Okay. Because whether or not we have Vaishnavi Diksha Gurus, well, I think it is an important issue. Okay. It's not, we're talking about an institutional practice. And so we're basically talking about culture. And the other thing that I came to realize as I matured is that there are sincere people on both sides of the issue, right? There are arguments on both sides of the issue. What I saw, you know, amongst our leaders is that they approached the issue from the proper perspective, even though not everybody agrees together. You know, our leadership doesn't all agree on this issue. But instead of approaching it from, you know, your culture, my culture, is Indian culture the same as Vedic culture, all that, they went to the standard of what would please Srila Prabhupada. Okay, and that's the proper discussion to have on that issue. What will please Srila Prabhupada? Because all of this culture and, you know, even Vedic culture, we're largely talking about a setup in the material world that is designed to help us go back to Godhead. And we want that setup to be based on Varnashram Dharma to give everybody the best chance to go back to Godhead. But ultimately, what Srila Prabhupada wants is much more important than this material consideration. So that's just an example of how we can focus on something material, but see it as something spiritual. We have to be aware of that. There's a particular brand of poison that I drink all the time, all right? And that is wanting to be seen as superior. Right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to do your best possible service. You know, that's an admirable goal. The poison comes in when it's like, I want to be seen doing the best possible service and everybody else's service should be just a little bit less than mine, right? And sometimes we feel like that. You know, sometimes we consciously or subconsciously are hoping that a devotee is going to fail, because it's going to make us feel better about ourselves. You know, I don't like what I look at when I look inside my heart. I don't like what I see there, right? So reassure me, you know, as a devotee by showing some of your bad qualities so that I don't have to look at my heart and I can talk about, you know, how fallen you are instead, right? And this is a very subtle poison because, you know, we're not like gross materialists. We don't say these things out loud, and we're not trying to sabotage each other, right? But there's that little, you know, little part of my heart that hopes that, you know, I can be the best. You know, that's why I'm here in the material world. I want it to be Krishna. I want to be worshipped. Right? But this is a very subtle poison. And because it's so subtle, because maybe that part of us that thinks that way is so small, it's easy to overlook, right? And the problem is, it's basically like a carcinogen, okay? A little small amount is not a big deal. But if it goes on and on for years and years, it becomes something much worse. You know, it triggers an illness that is much worse. So we have to, you know, remember that ultimately the goal is to be like Mother Yashoda, to be like Radharani. They don't care whether they personally do a service for Krishna. All they're thinking about is how to arrange things in a way to maximize Krishna's pleasure. You know, there's no ownership. Radharani doesn't think, wow, you know, I'm the best cook. I cook a different preparation for Krishna every day, right? No, she's constantly meditating on how can we make the offerings better and better. You know, how can we as a community arrange ourselves? Who can make this? Who can make that? She's always bringing the gopis in to serve Krishna, facilitating their service, because her highest goal is for Krishna to be pleased, right? So someday, I hope I am at the point where I can do my personal best to serve Srila Prabhupada and the devotees and take just as much joy in everyone else's service as I do in my own. That I won't feel like, oh, this is my service, I did this. You know, I will be able to look at the whole institution and understand that, you know, Krishna and Srila Prabhupada are doing this, and they're very kindly allowing all of us to help, right? Part of my need to feel exceptional is because internally I feel, you know, lacking, right? But the truth is, we're all special to Krishna. Each one of us is unique, and he wants a personal relationship with each one of us. And none of us are more exceptional than the next, right? You know, Krishna's love for each of us, you know, is just as powerful, just as potent, right? And that's okay. It's okay to be who we are. You know, and that's something that I don't know that we talk about enough in our movement. We have such a high standard, the very highest standard, complete surrender, 100% devotion to and love for the Lord. That is not something that comes easily to most of us, and that's okay. What we don't want to do is to pretend to be what we're not, because number one, it's not sustainable, you know, and number two, it actually prevents us from doing the work we need to make progress, you know. So to accept ourselves where we are and trust that if we follow Krishna's program, you know, Srila Prabhupada's instructions, that, yeah, it's all going to be okay, and Krishna's going to take care of us. So part of what I need to do, you know, is to understand that when Krishna's kicking me in the head, it's not a punishment, right? If I could let go of things more easily, Krishna wouldn't have to kick me in the head, right? But, you know, on those things that I'm not able to surrender, you know, yeah, sometimes he has to kick me in the head. And if I see it through that lens of, okay, Krishna, what do you want me to learn in this situation? I have a much better experience than if I see it as, Krishna, why are you persecuting me, right? Anything we go through can be transcendentally joyous if we have the right consciousness, right? The residents of Vrindavan stood under Govardhan Hill for 7 days, which, you know, if someone asked you to stand in place for 7 days, that would be, it wouldn't, you couldn't do it. Physically, you could not do it. It would be an austerity. It would be horrible. It would not be any fun at all, right? So if you look at the Vrajvasis and you don't understand their internal state, it looks like torture, right? Okay. But because they are exchanging with Krishna, exchanging love with Krishna all throughout the whole process, it's not painful, right? So I have to remember this when I'm going through tough times, that the circumstances are really not so important, right? What's important is cultivating that inner state, that inner connection with Krishna, right? A lot of times, as is natural, completely understandable reaction, when we're in distress, we try to rearrange our material circumstances, right? So that we won't be in distress anymore. And that there's nothing wrong with that. We live in this world, we have our duties, we have to act, right? But we should understand that it's not the rearranging of material circumstances that is going to give us relief, okay? It is the cultivation of the connection with Krishna, with Krishna's servants. That's what's going to give us real relief. One of the places, as I said before, where I have a hard time trusting Krishna is in relationship to my children, right? And I actually have a much easier time trusting him now because he's put me through some experiences where I definitely could not protect my children. It was made painfully obvious to me that I could not protect them, and amazingly enough, things worked out because, Krishna protected them instead. And, he did a better job than I would do, right? But I still have trouble understanding how, Krishna can take people's babies, take people's children. When I think about Devaki, everything came right in the end, but what about when she had, 6 children killed, right? And there are devotees in Russia, who became Vaishnavas during the communist rule, and they had their children taken away, right? They were considered unfit parents because they were devotees and they lost their children, right? And they didn't end up getting to have Krishna as their child and, be freed from prison, right? They just lost their children. How do I understand that? Does that mean that Krishna maybe is a little hard-hearted, or, is he punishing us? What is going on here? And I read something from a Christian writer that actually made me understand this. Carrie ten Boom was a Christian, and she was put in a concentration camp by the Nazis because she insisted on following her Christian faith of helping others, even if they happened to be Jewish. And she said something about that experience. She said, "You will never know that Christ is all you need until Christ is all you have." Right? And so I translate that, we will never know that Krishna is all we need until Krishna is all we have. So understanding that when Krishna takes things away, right, it's not a punishment, it's not hard-heartedness, just like a mother, may take something away from the child. You see your child, my granddaughter used to like to play with knives. She would go to the dishwasher and get sharp knives out of the, dishwasher, which was low enough for her to reach. And inevitably someone would take the knife from her and she would cry, right? So we can understand, even when it's painful, even when we don't see, how this is going to benefit us in the long run, we can understand that, yeah, Krishna is taking care of us, right? So when we try to increase our dependence on Krishna, when we act in such a way as to reinforce for ourselves that Krishna is our only shelter, right? That's when we make, spiritual advancement. That's important to our progress in spiritual advancement. And one last little point. When I'm in emotional distress, it's very hard for me, to remember proper behavior. This, again, is a very natural human tendency the hotter our emotional state, the more likely we are to react in a way that isn't what we necessarily think we should do, or even what we think we might do in that situation, right? You see this in the military, okay? They're trying to teach people to shoot, to kill, and they have procedures for everything. And the problem is when people are shooting back at you, right? You're in a completely different emotional state than you were when you learned this behavior. So they try to create that same sense of stress and danger by being really hard on their recruits. That's why boot camp is so terrible. I didn't realize this when my son joined the Navy and they put him through boot camp. I thought they were just being mean to my baby. But he was able to explain to me that no, there's a purpose to this, because it teaches us how to do our duty even when we're being shot at, right? That's what we're trying to learn. So as devotees, we want to learn how to do our duty even when everything seems to be against us, right? So the efforts that we make when we are in distress, they may be small. We may not be able to do everything we're supposed to do or do it in the way we're supposed to do it. But the efforts that we make in that stage, they bear great fruit, right? That's a lot of times where we learn the most potent spiritual lessons. So not only, is Krishna protecting me from things I don't need and, thinking of my long-term good, but he's actually giving me an opportunity to put something into practice. And if I even just try a little bit, I'm going to get an A, right? So that's, that's my thought about Krishna's coming and what we can learn.
Oh, wow. Anytime I hear from you, Radha Prabhu, my hand hurts from note taking. And then I basically come to the point where I realize I'm just going to have to listen back and write down every single word that she said. Because everything hits me so much, it resonates so much. And something that I'm always extremely grateful for when I hear from you is how you're very deeply knowledgeable. I mentioned to you privately before, you're so established in your Krishna consciousness, and you're so human. And I experience you to be such a strong Vaishnavi, and yet you share your heart so openly, and you share your own challenges in such a personal way. And this really helps me personally very, very much. And I'm sure so many other Vaishnavis who are watching and hearing from you. And
so that's the result of Krishna's mercy, because my default materially conditioned response is always, I want to have the perfect facade, right? Everything I do, I want to be seen as doing it the best. And as I mentioned, I had experiences with my children, who had struggles, but we were in a position such that, these struggles were obvious to the entire community we lived in, and I could have gotten really, really disturbed and created a lot of stress for myself by trying to pretend like everything was still okay, right? And I got exhausted, and Krishna, I just threw up my hands and said, okay, this is happening. My children are not perfect devotees. I'm not a perfect parent. Oh, well, what can I do? And by doing that, I found that, yeah, everybody's going through these things. It's this fear that if I show my heart, everyone will turn away. My reality has been, when I show my heart, so many people say, yes, I feel exactly the same way. I'm going through exactly the same thing. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I forgot I'm the MC. For me, I experience it when I hear from you as this combination of, oh, Krishna, if Radha Prabhu feels like that, well, what's the hope for me? And then the other part of me feels like, well, if Radha Prabhu feels like that and she's where she is, there's so much hope for me. So it's actually very
There's hope. There's
encouraging.
hope for all of us. It's not even hope, it's a reality.
Yeah.
And I've done enough research, in various ways to be sure that surrendering to the material energy is not going to make me happy. So there's only one thing left, right?
And that you raised so many eyebrows when you shared your compassion for Kalia. I never looked at him through human eyes before. So through your compassionate eyes, I could see that side of him, and it's given me so much to think about. Thank you very, very much. But I need to stop talking because so many questions have been flooding in, and I would love to take the opportunity to pose them to you, if that's okay.
Of course.
So they're such great questions. I'm just going to share them in the order that they came in. So one of our Zoom viewers asks, the Brajvasis saw Putana as a loving mother. Was their vision of her partly due to their pure hearts? Thus, they would only see the good in any person who approached Krishna?
I'm definitely not qualified to answer that. Whenever we talk about Krishna's dealings with his intimate devotees, Yoga Maya is making arrangements so that the pastime will be complete, the emotional exchange will be complete. So exactly what the cause was, I can't say.
Another question, also from a Zoom viewer. In your example of monetary insecurity versus depending on Krishna, how do we know when we should be helping ourselves, for example, saving money for retirement, etc., since Krishna gives us intelligence to do that, and when we should throw our hands in the air and just depend on Krishna?
Most things in this world, most of the things we have to decide in our lives, it's always about balance, right? That's one of the things that can make devotional progress so frustrating. You can't just put blinders on and, rinse and repeat something that's worked in the past. We always have to be aware and, making decisions based on current information. Me personally, I had to ask for help, from senior devotees. Am I not doing enough? Am I, trying to control the material energy? Where am I at here? But usually for me, a good sign is when I am struggling and struggling and struggling to make something happen and it's just not happening. You got to reach a point where you say, okay, I guess it's not how it's supposed to be. And also, my fear of financial insecurity, it's not necessarily that I have something or I don't have something, right? I can be fearful of financial insecurity even when I objectively have enough, right? Because it's just this fear of what if, what if one of my kids needs something? What if, my dad has to go into a nursing home? What if, right? And that's the part that I definitely need to turn over to Krishna, that if any of these circumstances arise, he will provide what will be needed.
Wow. There's so many deep questions that are coming in. Here's another one from a Zoom viewer. When we chant japa, but instead of asking for service, in our heart, we actually desire that Krishna fulfill our personal desires. Are we then approaching Krishna in the mood of Putana, in the sense that we externally seem ideal, but internally we desire to take? Thus, can we approach the holy name in the mood of a witch, and in that way be disappointing to Krishna?
Well, there's two parts to that question. The first is it possible for us to have, material motives when we engage in Krishna's service? It's not only possible, it's pretty much guaranteed that we are going to bring some material motives, to our practice because we're materially conditioned. One of the benefits of the holy name is that it purifies even when we approach with mixed motives, right? The second part of the question is Krishna going to be disappointed? You know, and I understand that question. You know, I really do. You know, we want to please Krishna, and wanting to please Krishna, recognizing that we have these mixed motives, and feeling badly about it and wanting it to be different, that's pleasing to Krishna, you know. But ultimately, Krishna knows where we're at, you know. Krishna's not going to be disappointed in me because I, you know, chant with a material motive. He knows I have that material motive. He knew it before I started chanting, right? So we have no choice but to follow the process, right? There's nothing else that's going to save us. So I don't think Krishna's disappointed. I think he's happy that we're trying.
You always give such kind answers. Thank you.
It's the mom energy.
Yeah, so sweet. A question from Facebook. Criticism is not the end of the world, you said. This is a powerful meditation. How can we use this in family life? Speaking of mom energy.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've learned about criticism in family life is it's really not necessary. You know, I mean, when I was raising my children, part of the reason why they had struggles is that I perceived correcting them and criticizing them as a helpful tool in helping them grow up to be, you know, good people and good devotees, right? And you know, now on the other side of having raised them, I realized that that was really a lousy tool, you know. So when we think about criticizing our family members, you know, we can step back and say, you know, what is it that I really want to have happen here, you know. And you know, people don't generally change because we criticize them. They just feel attacked. You know, there are other ways to have those discussions. And if people are criticizing me, you know, everybody gets criticized sometimes. But if it's a chronic thing, you know, if all you're getting from that person is criticism, then yeah, you have to look at the relationship, you know, and maybe make some adjustments. But it also starts with understanding that when someone's giving us a barrage of criticism, they're in pain, they're struggling, right? You know, and rather than take it to heart and think that it's about me, it's about what a failure I am, what a horrible person I am, we should understand that it's really not about us. You know, it's about their struggle.
So in this situation, Prabhu, when we're dealing with a family member who gives a barrage of criticism, but they're thinking of it as feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a family member that you have to live with and who's maybe not open to hearing feedback themselves, and this person's a devotee, then how do we handle that situation?
It's a tough situation, you know, and I don't think there's one answer to that. One of the things I think we do as women is we tolerate and tolerate and tolerate, you know, and we're humble and we take on the emotional struggles of all of our family members because we're the mom, right? You know, and if we're not careful, you know, that will end up making us weak, making us hurt, making us act out. I do this, that's why I say that. You know, I will tolerate and tolerate and tolerate, not give any feedback, not ask for anybody to change anything, not ask for any help, just tolerate, 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 until I lose it and behave like a crazy woman. And my family says, oh, wait, you know, this is not right, something's not right here, you know. But if you're in a situation like that, first of all, you have to be very realistic about what you can tolerate and how it's affecting you. Right? You can get outside support. You know, you can have somewhere you can go to talk about this and just vent, you know, and get it off your chest. Journaling, asking someone else to intervene, you know, that maybe the critical person might listen to. But it's a tough thing to handle. You know, Bhakti Tirtha Swami said, no one can hurt us like family. Right?
Thank you so much. Another wonderful question from a Zoom viewer. Hare Krishna, Mother Radha. Thank you for this thoughtful and deep class. My question, how can we be more open to criticism and feedback wherever it comes from? I liked the point that you made about how criticism is information to evaluate our behavior, but how do we change our consciousness to be more open to receiving feedback? Interesting how that ties very smoothly into what you were just saying.
Yeah, yeah. I know for me, part of it is separating my emotional reaction from the rest of the process. In other words, if someone criticizes me, I'm going to feel hurt and I'm going to feel angry, guaranteed, you know. So what I can do is just sit with those feelings and not act on them and not think that they have any meaning or reality beyond the fact that this is how I react, you know. And then when I get to the point of wanting to look for useful information, you know, when I'm calm, it's much easier. And I can say, you know, okay, this is relevant, this isn't, you know, this is something I'll think about. One of the things my husband and I have learned over the years that has made our relationship much more pleasant is that when we give feedback, right, we do it at a time and a place where the other person can step away if they want to, right? In other words, you know, I know he's not going to like hearing this. So let me not tell him this right before, you know, all of our guests are coming for dinner, or, you know, right before he's about to go do something important. You know, let's have this conversation at a different time. And so sometimes when people like to give us feedback, we kind of got to, you know, store it away until we have the space to deal with it. I think as devotees, we try to manage our emotions, right? You know, devotees don't get distressed, so I'm not going to get distressed. You know, devotees don't, you know, feel envious, so I'm not going to feel envious. Those feelings don't go away, right? We just drive them down to where we can't recognize them anymore. So, you know, feeling hurt and angry when someone criticizes us is not, you know, just like criticism, it's not the end of the world. You know, it's just don't let it drive your reaction. I don't know if I answered that question or not.
To me, you answered it perfectly. You see, clearly our ladies feel so comfortable asking you these kinds of questions, I think, because they're so grateful for your humanness in answering them, and mixed with a very deeply situated in Krishna consciousness. And that's so much needed, certainly for me personally, to
okay, so I can tell the facade is working just fine here, right?
just, you know, if that's what it is, please don't let the facade down, because it's helping us so much.
Okay.
I can't imagine that it is, however. This is a very powerful question that really struck me personally, and one that I can very much personally relate to from a Zoom attendee. How do we differentiate between the desire to have recognition in our service or a need for support and encouragement, especially if our service is isolating due to its nature?
Yeah. Well, you know, just like Putana, sometimes we can't tell, you know, and we depend on Krishna to reveal the truth to us. My vision of my own motives today is definitely different than it was 25 years ago, you know, so part of it is just allowing ourselves, you know, to grow and mature. And yeah, we're going to see things we didn't see before. So if like having this desire to get profit, adoration, and distinction, it's something that I know about myself. It's something that I want to change. But I'm not going to beat myself up and say, oh, I'm a horrible devotee and I should never ask for any praise because I have this horrible desire. If that would help me become more Krishna conscious, I would do it, but it wouldn't, you know. And so I think sometimes we're in a situation where we need support and encouragement. Everybody needs support and encouragement. That's a human need, right? So you're allowed to get that, you know, and if it turns out that some percentage of that was a desire for praise, that's okay, you know, because you will become purified. You know, we do grow in Krishna service, and it's really uncomfortable to be in that space between where I recognize my bad quality and where I can control my bad quality or you know, dampen it down. There's always a time period where I'm aware of the bad quality and it's in full flower, right? I hate that. It's painful, you know, but it's part of the process.
I think Radha Prabhu, you would be a wonderful person to give a class on the importance of giving, of expressing encouragement and appreciation to other devotees.
You know, it more than anything else, even material leadership classes will say, you know, you should catch your employees doing something right. In other words, don't always be pointing out what's wrong, what needs fixing, but give support and encouragement. And Srila Prabhupada is such a perfect example of that, you know.
I know I myself, and I've heard also from other ladies that they experience what they feel to be gaslighting when they're just asking for this very basic human need of encouragement. And then the amani namana dena is right away thrown out onto the table, and then we feel bad.
You know, one thing that we can do is support each other more, you know, especially in modern type households where it's a nuclear family. A lot of times women don't get very much association with other Vaishnavis, you know, and really, as much as I love my husband and I think men are wonderful and husbands are a very good institution that we should keep, I think it's rare to be in a relationship with a man and have him fulfill all our emotional needs. You know, I don't see that being true in very many places. So part of our conditioning is to want approval from men, to want to be protected by men, you know, to want support from men. That's fine. But we shouldn't forget that, you know, a big part of filling our emotional needs can come from Vaishnavis. You know, in the extended family setup, you have grandmothers, mothers, aunties, you know, you have all these women who are supporting you and helping you, and we can be that for each other.
I was definitely thinking how you're definitely, you and Mother Vrajlila, who's with us today in Zoom, are like the dream aunties. So we're so grateful that you've so generously extending yourselves to us, not only in the Sadhvi Sangha community, but also in other online communities. So we're
well, Vrajlila is, Vrajlila, that's where I learned this, you know, because she gives love so freely, you know, just it flows out from her. So if I can pass along a little bit, then I'm grateful.
Oh, whoops, I've unmuted Mother Vrajlila completely by accident.
Radha Dd, I am just so grateful that you are my friend in this lifetime. And we both have learned so much from each other as we journey on this Krishna conscious path. It's, yeah, I'm just happy. I wrote a note in the chat to share with you how grateful I am that you're able to show all of us how these pastimes, you know, we can kind of understand our behaviors from the pastimes of the Lord. And at the same time, be vulnerable in our Krishna consciousness to know where we are. That's so important. It's so key because so many times I see that we don't take the time to explore who we are and who we're becoming.
Yeah.
And so I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I love you.
I love you too.
Mother Vrajlila is just all heart. Her heart looks like a beautiful smiling face, don't you think, Radha Prabhu?
I do. I do.
Actually, I'm just so happy that Mother Vrajlila is going to be also speaking tomorrow
Yes.
as part of the festival. So please don't miss that. Tomorrow in America, where Mother Vrajlila is based, it is Janmashtami itself. So it's going to be extra special. And it's special for another reason, which I won't say right now. because I might get into trouble. We had one last question that a lady was asking. Let me just find it quickly. I'm so sorry. Very simple, but very deep. How can one increase one's trust in Krishna?
By trusting Krishna. There's a psychological thing they do called exposure therapy. When you're afraid of something, you expose yourself to it in small doses and, kind of train yourself to tolerate it. So we start with small things. There's, like my husband, bless his heart, whatever we've done in devotional service, he's always thinking how to increase it, right? And there was a point at which we were doing home programs, and we were doing, like 3 or 4 a week, and he decided we should do one more, and I'm thinking, I can't do this, I am wrung out, you're using up all my energy, I just, and I can be stubborn, and he can be stubborn, which is a good combination. So this was one little moment where I said to myself, okay, just try it. Let Krishna be in control. Just try it, And it went so smoothly. Now whenever we argue about, what we should do, he's always like, well, remember that time, you said we couldn't do it, and we could. So, so it's, we start with little things like that. Sometimes as young devotees, we think, okay, I'm just going to give up everything, sell all my possessions, move into the temple and completely depend on Krishna, and if that's truly where your heart is, then that's what you do. But if that's not truly where your heart is, that's okay. Just start small.
Your answers always remind us that like you give us these baby steps and you lay them out very nicely, and I appreciate that very, very much about your guidance. I
depend on these baby steps. I can't do big.
I'm wondering if you might have any other classes coming up on any other sanghas that I can post about in Sadhvi Sangha.
Well, there's a couple coming up, but they're not going to be in English. I mean, I'm speaking in English, so I can send you that information.
Please. What language will they be in?
Spanish.
Perfect. Then I hear you twice.
Oh, yeah.
Is it for the Spanish Sadhvi Sangha, our sister group?
I'm not sure, actually.
Okay.
It's a devotee in Mexico that is arranged.
Wonderful. So I'll follow up with you so I can share that. See, it's actually nice when there's a class with translation. It gives you the time to take the notes in between.
There you go.
Thank you so very, very much, Radha Prabhu. I don't know if you wanted to share any closing thoughts?
Well, I just want to thank you all again for what you're doing. And I guess I do want to emphasize that, we are ISKCON's greatest underutilized resource as Vaishnavis, but also we are each other's most, underutilized resource. So the more we can support and love each other, and be authentic with each other, the stronger our whole society will be.
Well, that's a perfect segue to what's really in my heart, is to just express that I would be so grateful if you would come speak to us again, or any opportunity to hear from you on any online Sangha, because regardless, we always share it with our members, and to have the opportunity also to be with you in Zoom and to share questions from our members, it's very, very precious. And thank you so much for reminding us that it's okay to be ourselves, really.
Yes. Krishna loves you just the way you are.
Oh. Well, maybe you, but me?
No. Yeah, everybody.
I'm not kidding.
All right. All right, Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much.
If you have a moment, I just
was very nice.
Briefly wanted to mention the title of Mother Rajleela's class tomorrow, and
Yes.
then just allow our Zoom attendees to unmute themselves briefly just to express their brief appreciation. So Mother Rajleela's class tomorrow, I feel, will perfectly follow up on what you've been sharing this evening. The title is Celebrating Lord Krishna's Advent, because remember, for her it is Janmashtami tomorrow.
Yeah.
Recommitting and rededicating ourselves to live by the will of Lord Krishna.
Yes, yes, yes.
Perfect follow-up. So ladies, please don't miss this tomorrow evening. And I just want to warn you, you will lose your heart to Mother Rajleela. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you again so very, very much, and for tolerating me as an MC. And hope to have you back very soon. Now I have to figure out, I guess I'll just invite all the ladies to unmute themselves and just take a brief moment to express your appreciation before we allow Radha Prabhu to escape from us. We'll just try to catch her again soon.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the class. Very inspiring and very honest. I learned a lot.
Encouragement.
I wish everybody a happy Janmashtami.
Happy. I miss you.
I miss you too. Come to California.
It's so beautiful to see the interaction between you two. We us Vaishnavis, we learn a lot, and I'm so glad you came in, and your comments, your questions, everybody's were just like what we were all going through, and this has been a very helpful session. Thank you so much, and so happy to see you again. If you can come back again, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to say a quick thank you before we close?
Thank you so
Jai.
much. Thank you so much, Radha Dd, for your class. I really appreciate how you were able to take the stories we hear so often and like show the gems on how we can look at that and how we can improve as devotees. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your encouragement.
Also, Kamaniya, you are an excellent facilitator. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu.
I was too slow to mute her.
Just surrender. Trust Krishna.
Radha Prabhu, thank you very, very much. We're really, truly grateful to you. And what I like to do when I'm involved in hosting a meeting is I like to keep the Zoom meeting open in case any ladies would like to interact with each other. But please feel free to leave if you need to. I know you're very, very much in demand. Everybody wants you to come and speak, so we don't expect you to stay.
I think the laundry wants me to come and do it. So
Oh,
Hare Krishna. Haribol.
Mother Rajleela, we'll see you tomorrow.
Haribol.
Yes.
Haribol.
Haribol. Thank you.
Haribol.
Haribol. Sarva, Nisha, Deepak, Devaki. Hari Hari.
Oh. So I'm going to stop the live stream, and then ladies feel free to stay in the Zoom room, and we can exchange if you would like to meet each other. Hare Krishna. And all glories to Sharadiya Rasa for this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful vision of Sadhvi Sangha, online Vaishnavi community in this very blissful festival. We love you, Sharadiya.
Absolutely.
Haribol.
So we're off Facebook, and we are in private now. So ladies, feel free to share whatever you would like to share and come off camera. Now we can see you.
Good. We're still recording.
Stop recording. Yes, I was just going to say I will stop the recording. Stop